In case you haven't heard, this is an election year, and of course we have the presidential election coming up in November. What you may or may not know is we got some primary elections coming up here in the state of Missouri that is just right around the corner, and here to talk about that is Mary Wheeler Jones and Gary Stoff of the Board of Elections here in St. Louis. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
First off, just biggest misconceptions people have about voting in the primary elections. Mary, I'll start with you, Mary.
I think people don't understand in primaries you have to choose a ballot, a party ballot or a nonpartisan ballot. So that is something we try to educate people on. You have to say if you're a Democrat or Republican. Or if you don't want to say that, you have to say, well, give me a nonpartisan ballot.
And there's a difference if you decide to go that route. If you decide to choose a nonpartisan ballot, you can't vote on.
You can't vote on the candidates. You can only vote on the issue, and in this election, it's a constitutional amendment that's on the ballot. So if you don't want to choose a party ballot, you can't vote for your favorite candidate or your least favorite candidate.
Now, Gary, what do you guys do to get people to go out and vote for these primary elections? Because a lot of people don't think about voting in August. They think about what's coming up in November.
That's true, and it's a little bit sad because the primary sets the stage for November. We do publicize the elections in the newspaper. We also send a voter notification card to every registered voter prior to every election, and that's extremely important, not just to tell them there's an election coming up, but that also tells them their ward, their precinct, and most importantly, their polling place where they have to go to vote, because to vote, you have to be registered, you have to have some form of ID, which does not have to be photo, and you have to be in the right polling place.
Yes. Now, and this year, speaking of that, there's something new that people are getting in the mail.
Well, it's not new. It's not new.
Okay.
We send these out we send a notification card out prior to every election. They're always a little creative looking like this, but we do send them. But what's on this one this time, and it is every 2 years, is your actual permanent ID card. And on your permanent ID card, it gives you all your information that you can carry around in your pocket and keep with you forever as long as you're still a registered voter in the city. So that is the additional piece of information on your card this time. And then it's all the calendar dates of upcoming elections. And most importantly, the word Gary and I and the board wants to get out is that pay attention to what's on this card, the information, because of redistricting, your polling place and your precinct may have changed.
I had a question about that for you, Gary. As far as redistricting, why do we do the redistricting? Is it to benefit the candidates, or is it because it makes it easier on the voter?
Well, it probably depends on your perspective, but every 10 years we do a census. That's mandated by federal law. And as a result of the changes in population, then all of the legislative districts have to be realigned to provide as much balance as possible, both in terms of numbers of registered voters and trying to preserve historical voting patterns. And so what you have in Missouri, as other states, congressional districts change, state rep districts change, state senate districts change, our ward boundaries change, and after all that takes place, then we have to redo the precinct line so that when a voter goes in a polling place, they only vote for one state rep, for example. And so this card is extremely important because it reminds folks, even if you've been going to the same place for a long time, check your card because that voting place may have changed.
And we don't want to stand in line for however long it takes and then get up there and find out that
We're in the wrong place.
we're in the wrong place.
But if they happen to go in the wrong place, the people there can provide them the correct information.
We do have a mechanism for doing that. And it's really important, I think, for the voter to take the time not only to know where they're supposed to vote, but to look at the candidates because they can facilitate their own voting process if they have some idea for whom they want to vote on Tuesday.
When would be, Mary, the absolute last day that somebody can go out and register to vote?
You can register to vote all the time, anytime. But if you want to vote in this particular election on August the 7th, you should have been registered by July the 11th. So if you're registered today or tomorrow, you'll be able to vote in the November election, but you won't be able to vote in the, unless you move from one address to another address within the city of St. Louis, then you still can vote in this election. But if you've moved from the county to the city or vice versa, you won't be able to vote in the August election. But you will be considered registered on that date and for future elections.
Now, you all have some really good tips and some ideas, some things that people need to know before they get to Election Day. What are some of those things that you know that people need to be reminded of, or things that people don't even realize?
Well, again, we want to remind them to pay attention to their card, read that information, know where their polling place and their precinct is, know their state reps, so they know when they ask for their ballot, they'll know who's on there. To know what identification they can bring. Again, we're not a picture ID state, but there are a lot of creative flexible identifications that you can bring, such as your utility bill, your help me out here.
Well, a driver's license.
Would a library card work?
No.
No.
No,
library
but
card
actually,
won't work.
this particular card is a form of ID,
That's a form of
as
ID,
well
too.
as the
Social Security number?
Yes, Social Security card, a current utility bill or bank statement, or if you're a college student in Missouri, your student ID card would also work.
The student ID card will work?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, something that you said, Mary, was that something that I think most people don't realize is that if you have been convicted of a felony, you can actually vote once your conditions have expired.
Exactly. If you're no longer on the term on the streets on papers,
Mm.
but but basically, if you're no longer under supervision, probation, or parole, then you can vote again, unless you committed a crime that's related to elections, and that's
Okay.
a different story.
Exactly.
But convicted felons who are no longer on supervision can have their voting rights reinstated and bring us verification. It's a letter they get showing they're released from supervision, and then they can vote on Election Day.
You know, because voting is one of the most important rights we have as Americans. You know, I who have traveled in other countries, and, you know, I know Rob has familiarity with people from other countries, and it really is a big deal here. I mean, that's a big right that we want to preserve
It is.
at all
And we're
costs.
familiar with that too, because we've worked with other people from other countries who've come here just to talk to us about our voting, and we're just telling people that. We've talked to people who are not allowed to vote, who are restricted, and the one right you definitely have is the right to vote, and your vote does count.
It counts.
It does count.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly on the local level. And when you think about it, Egypt, for example, for the first time in their history, they recently had elections. People are dying, fighting every day for the right to vote.
Yes.
And in our country, you have that right. You have the right to register, you have the right to vote, and it's a cherished right which everyone really should exercise.
So again, the primary election is on August the 7th, and you encourage people to go out and check your card and where to go vote, and you know, the times are pretty much from
6
o'clock in
a.m.
the morning,
to
yep,
7 p.m.
6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Okay, so make sure you
Exactly.
check your ID card and check where you're supposed to go vote, because that is very, very important. We want to thank you both for joining us on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Thank
You
you.
got a lot of good information. We're going to take another break here on St. Louis Presents. When we come back, we're going to wrap things up with some food from Jeff Merriweather.